The reason we called everyone together for the discussion is the board and the Suicide Fatality Review Committee meet over this past year. We've continued to see an increase in the suicide deaths in Mahoning County. We currently have 49 deaths. I think the number's increased since the beginning of November to almost, I think we're at 50 or over. And we've seen an increase in the past 3 years. And what we're seeing is an alarming statistic. And the reason we've asked the members of OSPF and Mercer County Behavioral Health Commission to join us, because they're also seeing similar things in other parts of the state. And in Mercer County, they're also seeing similar things, that there's an increase in the suicide deaths for older adults in our senior population. And we currently have 9 individuals that are over the age of 70 who've died by suicide. And as we approach the holidays and get together, we thought it was important to talk about the identifying some of the risk factors and how we can help our loved ones during the holiday season. And I just want to thank everyone again for joining us. I'd like to introduce Tony Coder. He's the Executive Director of Ohio Suicide Prevention Foundation, to talk about some of these risk factors, what OSPF is seeing in other counties in Ohio, and what we could do to help our families. So thank you.
Thank you. My name is Tony Coder, and I am the Executive Director of the Ohio Suicide Prevention Foundation. We're a nonprofit based in Columbus that works with communities statewide to curb suicide and educate about good mental health wellness practices. I'm also the chair of the American Association of Suicidology, and recently the United States set a record for the number of suicide deaths in the country, with nearly 50,000 people dying by suicide in 2022. We in Ohio have an increase since COVID to around 1,766 deaths in 2021, the last official numbers. And the unofficial numbers that we're seeing already for 2022 looks like it's going to be a little over 1,800 for Ohio. What we also have known is that the majority of suicides are adults over the age of 35. 80% of our suicides are adults. And we think of this as a youth problem, and really, even in the national stats, we saw a 16% decrease for suicides ages 10 to 14, and a 9% decrease of young people 15 to 24. However, we're seeing those record numbers of suicide. So it points to the numbers of adults that are struggling. One of the major parts of our work is to equip people with knowledge and information about the possible signs of suicide, what you can do to help stop it. And this can be a scary topic. My son had a suicide attempt 6 years ago, my adult son, and I have been in behavioral health for 23 years, and I was paralyzed by this. It is a scary topic, but just like anything else that might be scary, facing it head on, understanding, what you need to say, understanding those signs are really something that we try to push at OSPF and nationally at the American Association of Suicidology. We're just asking you today from Ohio Suicide Prevention Foundation, and I want to thank Dwayne again for hosting this really, really important topic around this time of year. Check with somebody. That can be as easy as it can be. Check with somebody during the holidays and after the holidays. Some of the signs that you might see that might be out of norm are isolation. Maybe somebody that you have been you go to breakfast with, or you see on a regular basis, all of a sudden they're not showing up as much. That could be a sign of suicide. Mood changes. Maybe someone who's been happy or sad have changed their mood to something that is not in character for what they have, kind of always been. Planning. Giving away possessions. I talked to a banker organization yesterday about doing some training for their bank. Taking out large sums of money, giving it away. way, even working with ASPCAs and the Humane Society about giving away pets and those types of things, giving away those prized possessions, that heirlooms. Those are all things that we look for signs of suicide, and also increased use of substances or alcohol. But these are not the only signs. There are many, many. Basically, if you see a friend or family member or loved one not acting, the way that you've always kind of known them, being quiet, staying away, talking about being discouraged, even saying, I'm pretty hopeless. Life is pretty hopeless right now. Just check in. These people, and folks, the first step they usually don't do is, oh, I need to go see a counselor. They're displaying these signs elsewhere, and you as a friend, as a family member, are the most important front line to preventing suicides. So ask them again, just ask them what they're doing. I have a document here, how to have the conversation. Also, call 988. You have a tremendous helpline network and so many resources that Dwayne is going to share later in Mahoning County. Reach out. There are people to help. It is a scary topic, but being able to understand what resources we have in Mahoning County can literally be a life-saving event. So again, I thank you all for being here this morning. It is my privilege to introduce my former board chairperson, Sandy Williams. Sandy has been impacted by suicide. I will let her go into it by the death of her father. Sandy, take it away.
Thanks. First, I want to apologize for not being there with you today. When I got up at 4:45 this morning to start getting ready, my cat looked at me and said, "What the heck?" But my husband, who was driving me, said he had had a tough night and hadn't slept. And we did a COVID test. The good thing is it's not COVID. The bad thing is I have no sense of direction. If I had tried to drive myself, I'd probably be in Pennsylvania right now. So again, I apologize for not being there in person. Yeah, I want to take a few minutes to talk to you about my experience and what I have learned over the last 12 years about suicide. The first thing, and I heard this in a conference, and I can't get it out of my head. So I want to share it with all of you to hold on to today while we talk about this topic. What we need to do for people who are struggling is to tether people to life more than they are tethered to death. And that might sound extreme, but for people who are really struggling and feeling hopeless, that pull of maybe I would be better off dead can too often be stronger than that pull of life. And that unfortunately is much too true when people are seniors. So let me tell you about my experience, and then I want to throw some statistics at you just to let you know how much of a problem this truly is. 12 years ago, I was absolutely living my best life. I am a lawyer. I was at the time a corporate vice president. I am married, luckily, to my best friend. I have a lot of good friends. Everything in life was just fabulous. And then at 8 o'clock in the morning on April the 25th, 2011, my phone rang in my office. When I picked it up, it was my parents' neighbor, and they had told me that my father shot himself. And what do you do from there? I will tell you right up front, before I tell you more about my dad, that he had talked about this before, but we didn't believe it. Really thought that if he talked about it, he wasn't going to do it. So part of me was shocked, part of me wasn't. But I can still remember every single thing about that day. I can tell you what I was wearing. I could tell you what I said to my sister when I had to call her and tell her what happened. I can tell you what I said to my husband when I called him and said, "Please come get me. We've got to get on the road to get to my mom." And I remember those things every single time I still travel to my mom's and I enter Belmont County, which is where they lived. What I can also tell you is I knew nothing about suicide. And this is even though one of my father's brothers had taken his life several years before. We just never talked about it. So it just wasn't ever on my radar. Being who I am and being a lawyer, what I do is delve into things and study them to try and understand. And so that's what I did with suicide. And And I realized that everything I thought was absolutely wrong. As I said, my mom and I had talked about it the weekend before my dad died. And we said, oh, he's talking about this, so he definitely won't do it. People who talk about killing themselves won't do it. Well, now I know, he might as well have been carrying around a big sign that said, yeah, I'm going to do this, because he was telling us. He wasn't trying to get sympathy. He wasn't, trying to get a reaction. He was telling us that he was normalizing this in his own mind, and he was preparing for that. I believe that strong people, if you're strong, you're not going to kill yourself. Well, that's absolutely not true either. My dad led a pretty amazing life. He was the strongest person I ever knew. He had just a high school education, but he rose through the ranks of the Kroger Corporation, became an executive. He was well known in the community, well respected. He was sought after to be on boards. He was really active in community affairs. So he was just sort of the opposite of, the picture that is painted of somebody who may not be strong enough to want to go on with life. And finally, there's this sense that people who die by suicide are people who are down on their luck. They're avoiding some bad thing they did, or they have an alcohol and drug problem that they just can't handle. And none of that is true, by the way, but none of that was true for my dad. So again, I was befuddled. But again, as I started researching, and I found out, okay, he had this amazing life. He was always smiling. He was always joking. He was helping other people, but he began to struggle with some health issues after he retired. He had prostate cancer, and he had tinnitus, which is ringing in the ears. And I know that was really a real problem for him. He started then, when he had these issues, withdrawing. He had always been so outgoing, and he just started withdrawing and wanting to stay home more and becoming, like me, more of an introvert, quite frankly, but that wasn't him. He told us repeatedly he didn't want to live in pain. He told us repeatedly he didn't ever want to be a burden to us. And he was very upfront about the fact that he would take his own life before any of that could happen. He was so fearful of being put in a nursing home or having, something else as he aged health-wise that would take away his independence. So we unfortunately really believed that the dad we had always known, we would just keep treating him as we always had, as the rock, as the head of the family, and that his, the way that we loved him would keep him here. And that just obviously didn't happen. So what I know now is that everything I thought was wrong and really were myths about suicide that a lot of us think of and unfortunately rely on. And those myths are resulting in the death toll that Tony just talked to you about. When I walked away from my father's grave, I literally swore to him I was going to work on this and I was going to figure it out, because he was just too special to be a statistics. And by the way, I forgot, I wanted to show you so everybody knows who I'm talking about. This is my dad. He was a real person. And I think that's really important for everybody to know. This isn't just a story. This is about a real guy here who I miss every single day. When I started looking into everything, even though I swore to my dad he wouldn't be a statistics, I found out he was a stereotype. He died 2 days short of his 75th birthday. Men in that age range, as Tony mentioned, are among the highest suicide victims that we have. In fact, the CDC just a couple of weeks ago put out some new statistics on suicide rates. As Tony mentioned, we are unfortunately at the highest rate we've been since, I think, 1941. Overall, in the United States, we have 14.3 suicides per 100,000 people. For people over the age of 75, that rate goes up to 21 per 100,000 people. And hang on for this, for men over the age of 75, that rate jumps up to 43.7 per 100,000 people. We are losing 44 really loved men per 100,000 every year, and we're not talking about it. We're not focusing on that. My dad died in the spring. Kind of another myth. It is the holiday season, and so it's a good time to connect with family and find out what's happening. Most people think the suicides happen around the holiday time, and that isn't necessarily true. A lot of people around the holidays sense some hope they are with family, maybe they're not as isolated. And so they have a sense that maybe I can make it through this. If I can get through the holidays, get into the spring, I'll feel better. Well, when they don't feel better, when they get into the spring, like my dad, they often give up and take their life. My dad was suffering from, as I said, some physical issues, but he also was suffering from depression and anxiety. I apologize. I have a lot of chiming clocks and it's 1:15. Depression and anxiety can be a deadly duo when you've also got some medical issues. And again, they made him believe he was going to lose his autonomy. And as many people do, he thought he would be a burden to us as his family. And so he thought the best thing to do was to take his life. He used a gun to take his life. More than 50% of people who die by suicide use some kind of firearm. In older men, that rate goes up to 75%. So again, my father unfortunately fit into all of these categories and seemed to be a statistic. But I promised him I wasn't going to let him be that statistic. So I've spent the last 12 years working with people like Tony to make sure that that doesn't happen and that we can save other families from going through what my family went through. As I've worked with Tony and others and studied a lot, what I'm finding, unfortunately, is most of the prevention activities are focused on younger people. And while I, certainly don't have any issue with saving anyone's life, I wonder why we can't look at the totality and figure out how we craft prevention activities to go with appropriate age ranges, because everybody is different. As we age, there's just like a lot of different things going on with our life. And people don't want to think about those things. I mean, you think about it, one of the stigmas that we're dealing with here, I mean, we're dealing with the mental health stigma and suicide, but aging. I just passed one of those nasty milestone birthdays myself. And I know, as I look around, it's like, if you look at any television program, advertisements, it's like aging is a sin, right? I mean, there are just a lot of cruel jokes. Go look for a birthday card for anybody over the age of 35, 40, God forbid, 50. Advertisers, you get over the age of 50, you fall out of their demographics. They're really not interested in what you have to say. And for women, it's almost a sin that we've committed by aging, right? There's just a lot of things we have to do to stop ourselves. So we're getting all of these unspoken, but kind of an accepted cultural message that aging is a bad thing. And then put on top of that, there's also this unspoken message that suicide is something either that only happens in the younger population, or if it does happen among older people, it's not as much of a tragedy somehow as it is with a younger person. Again, our prevention activities are aimed mainly at younger people, even though, as I told you, the younger population, thank God, that rate is going down, but the rate for older adults is going up, but still we don't have activity. Tony and I have looked, and there's just not programs out there to help us relate to the special issues that somebody, an older adult might have and is dealing with. And so we're just, we're not looking for those signs that could be different. I mean, we've got a lot of activities, for example, for younger people to say, here's how you recognize signs in your friends. Here's how to talk to friends. Here's how to reach out and get help. We don't do any of that for older people. When I talk to my mother, who is 87, every day she's looking in the obituaries to see which friends she's lost. She's not comfortable talking to people about her mental health because she wasn't raised in a time where that was a thing that you talked about. So we know that there are issues, but we don't like to admit that it's happening. For a variety of reasons, unfortunately too, people who are older are losing the protective factors that younger people have. I mean, younger people tend to be afraid of pain. They're afraid of death. Older people, not so much. Again, look at my mom. She's 87. She's on the daily basis says it's harder for her to get out of bed and there's new aches and pains. And so those protective factors that we might have had that would keep us from taking our life as a younger person aren't necessarily there as an older person. Our health becomes more precarious. So the likelihood of an older person dying regardless of the means they use, is much higher than it would be for a younger person. Older people are more isolated. Tony mentioned that, and these days, you know, especially when we're in the pandemic, but even coming out of that, older people tend to spend more time alone in their homes. And because of that, maybe they're not even missed like a younger person would be. So you could maybe be in your home for a few days before anybody says, hey, has anybody seen Sandy anywhere? Haven't seen her outside her house in a few days. So it's easier for older people to kind of get lost in the isolation, and if they were to make an attempt on their life to be successful. Older people are also better planners than younger people. They don't tend to act impulsively. They have a plan in their head, whether it is that firearm or maybe hoarding drugs, saving up those pills so that when they make that decision that today is the day, they're more likely to be successful than a younger person is. And finally, older people don't tend to attempt suicide. They mean to take their life when they do it. For example, for every 100 attempts by a young person, 1 person will die. In people over 65, for every 4 attempts, there is a death. I heard a doctor recently describe the 5 Ds that are often present in later life, and that unfortunately can add to the likelihood of suicide. The first D is depression. And I want to focus on that for just a second to say the likelihood of an older person having depression is maybe like 50% higher than a younger person, again, because of the time of life and just the changes in your life and losing friends and losing a spouse and the aches and pains and disease, all of those things. But I, at the same time, want you to know that it's not a given that just because you're older, you have to be depressed. And I think too often medical professionals can dismiss that. You go in and you say, I have aches and pains, and they're just like, oh, well, you're just aging. And, So it's like sometimes there is depression and it gets dismissed as aging, and other times, there's actual, hey, I'm just doing okay. I just happen to be getting a little older, and a doctor wants to say, well, of course you're old, you're depressed. And I'm like, no, I'm not depressed. I just have some aches and pains. Can we deal with those? So we all have to listen more to people and understand what they're telling us, not just dismiss that you're old, so you're going to be depressed. That's not true. But the fact that somebody is older and has gone through a lot, yeah, they might have some depression, and we shouldn't just dismiss that as a sign of aging. So depression is the first D. Second D is disconnected, social isolation. The third is disease. And again, unfortunately, I don't know about you, but I mean, I just had my annual physical, and it's like, where did all these things come from all of a sudden that I have to take medicine that I never had to take before? The fourth D is disability, again, for especially people that are used to being active. And suddenly they have mobility issues. They have pain when they didn't used to. As I said, my mom told me the other day, she's almost afraid to get up in the morning because there's always a new pain. And having gone through what I've gone through, that makes me worry. The fifth D is means to deadly means access. As I said, 75% of older men have access to use guns, and they kill themselves with that, and that is much higher than any other group. So even if you take any one of those Ds and add to that the feelings of hopelessness and despair, and maybe throw in some fear of being a burden on families, and there's the perfect storm for suicide. So we have to face facts. Even though older adults are the largest growing population in our country, we live in a youth-oriented society. So we end up with 2 times the stigma for seniors. The stigma attached to mental health issues from which they might suffer, as well as the stigma that's attached to simply getting older, which should be a privilege, but unfortunately we don't look at it that way. The bottom line, in my opinion, is that suicide at any age is a tragedy, but too often with older adults, the loss is kind of met with, oh, well, that's kind of a shame, but gosh, they lived a true life. So how much of a tragedy can that be? In fact, Tony shared with me one day when we were having breakfast that he talked to a medical doctor who said that. And I was somewhere between raged and heartbroken at that thought that even a doctor would think that that's not a great loss, that an older person died. I certainly wasn't ready for my dad to leave. I was prepared in 2 days to celebrate his 75th birthday. But unfortunately, the combination of his age and suicidal ideation meant that he wasn't really being monitored as closely as he should have been monitored by his doctors. He wasn't being honest with them, I will admit that. But when he did try to reach out and get help, his general practitioner wouldn't even literally look at him. He went to the doctor's office, he sat in the waiting room with my mom, and the doctor walked by and would not even acknowledge him because he was there to get some kind of medication for his depression. And I understand the doctors don't always feel comfortable. They're not all trained in mental health issues, but that just kind of added to everything my dad was feeling, that he wasn't valued, that it wasn't worth it for him to stick around when even his doctor didn't want to help him. And, you know, if you throw a statistic at you, 70% of suicide victims see their general practitioners within a month of their death. 20% see them the same day. So it's really important that we work, again, within that community to help them understand that, yeah, an older person might be a pain in the butt sometimes and come in all the time complaining of aches and pains, but maybe they're really saying something else. Maybe they're giving you another message that they need some different kind of help. Not just here's a pill, please leave my message, please leave my office. So my message, bottom line, is this: prevention activities with seniors not only have to increase, but in many ways, they have to be even more intentional. Social support systems are critical. Protective factors for seniors are critical. Staying involved in activities, organizations, even with family life, those add meaning to people's lives. And we need to make sure that we are proactive in making sure that we keep older adults involved in organizations and activities and in family life, so that they have a reason to get up in the morning and a reason to get out. If we miss the signs, if you ignore the signs, take it from somebody who knows, you are doing it at your own peril. I ignored those signs. I didn't want to believe my father would ever take his life, even though he told me he would. And I sit here today, unfortunately, getting ready for my 12th Christmas without him. And it never gets any easier. Depression can be detected and it can be treated rather than just chalked up to aging and dismissed. We have to acknowledge that isolation and loneliness are killers. And those are not the same thing. You can be isolated, but you can be lonely and be among people if they're ignoring you because they don't think that you have anything to add to the party because of your age. So we have to make a true effort to connect with people of all ages and make certain they're valued and make certain they feel valued as a part of society. Even the smallest act of kindness to an older person can mean so much to them. So we just have to, again, remember that aging is a privilege. It shouldn't be looked at as something to be ashamed of. And once we can look at that as a privilege, maybe we can look at it with more value and save more lives. Thank you so much for letting me talk to you today. Again, I apologize for not being there in person.
Good morning, I'm Dwayne Picciarelli. I'm the Executive Director of the Mahoning County Mental Health Board, and you said she was a rock star. She's a rock star. I'm gonna start with a joke because that's how I handle stress. And for some reason, I'm very stressed today, but I actually bought you a box of candy to give you today. I looked at it all week and I didn't, and I'm glad I didn't. Don't eat it on the way. Okay. But I want to thank also on the line, I see Emily and Doug from our the state office of mental health and addiction services. And I'm so glad you're here to witness this. Tonight's not really a press conference, it's more of a call to action. And what I want the State Department to see is in this room, we have Job and Family, Children's Services, the DD Superintendent, most of our agencies, the hotline, the Health Department, victims advocates, and on. But it shows you in Mahoning County, we get things done. We're going to pull together as an agency, as a county to get this done. I was thinking back a year ago, I was at a meeting and they told me that there were 40 or 50 kids at the mission. And I think, dear God, there's 40 kids at the mission at Christmas morning. No kid should wake up Christmas morning at the mission. Well, then, as I talked to Lee, in 21, we had 41 suicides. In 22, we had 44 suicides. And in 23, we had 49. So 49 families are going to have a much different Christensen they had before, and that's unacceptable. 18% of these people were over 70 years old. This is going to stop. This is the call to action in Mahoney County. We're going to take care of it. She covered most of my points, so we're lucky, so you don't have to hear from me, but why are we having it now during the holidays? It's the perfect time. You get together with family, you're seeing people you never saw before, so I'm asking you to reach out. If you see something, say something. Reach out to somebody, you know. Older people should be honored. Older people are afraid. I'm saying older people, they're probably near my age, although my staff says that they're gone. But older people feel embarrassed. They don't want to seek help. Men are great at masking problems. Many of us have known people have taken their lives. We've talked to them a few days before, never saw the issue. You know, one of the things I'm most proud about in Mahoning County is we are a trauma-informed community. So, and that's something I practice all the time. If you see somebody that's angry, and a lot of times older people, especially older men, will be, you'll say the grumpy old man or the man that's angry or pulling back. You know, you first want to kind of go back at them. But what we're trained is to say, what's happened to this person instead of saying what's wrong with this person. And I do it over and over again because you're in the store and someone's angry or someone's grumpy or someone's doing something. Just kind of step back. Could have lost their wife. They could have been ill. Something could be on. They could have lost their job. Just step back. You know, we all have to be gatekeepers. And we're going to talk a little bit about that in Mahoning County and before I finish. But, you know, we got to keep people safe. The pandemic was the perfect storm for all of this because we were taught to isolate. People pulled themselves. They stopped talking to their neighbors. How many people here don't even know who your neighbors are? This, again, has to stop. So in Mahoning County, we're going to work together. I worked on the hotline for 24 years, and in those days was almost all volunteers, and the staff answered the phone, all of us. And when you pick up that phone, and it could be easy because it's also the information referral number, but it could be as easy as the phone number for the food bank. But it could be the moment you picked up that phone, if there was a deep breath and the person was speaking right from their soul, you knew in that moment it was somebody in the deepest, darkest part of their life. And your job, as we heard, is to kind of give them hope. Hope is such a powerful tool. But with suicide, and I say it 100 times, every time I talk to people, it has nothing to do with dying. It has everything to do with pain. So we have to help with that. And I think we can together. You know, the one thing I want to mention, I always say this. When I was a case manager, before many of you were born, I worked at Easter Seals, and I called a number thinking I was calling a referral, and it was a church. And when I called the church, I said, you know, they said, "Oh, I'm sorry." I said, "I'm sorry, it's the wrong number." And the receptionist said, "No, it's not." I never forgot about that. So I guess what I'm telling the agencies in Mahoning County we're all going to do, there are no wrong numbers. If you call a place and they can't help you, they need to give you a number to help you. They need to say, in Ohio, and we're going to hear from Pennsylvania shortly, but in Ohio, call 988. Because if you can't pay your gas bill, if you're an elderly person that doesn't know when your next meal's coming from, or you're going to be evicted, you're in crisis. So I don't want anyone ever to say, "We're sorry, we can't help you." We can help you, but you can call 988. You can call 211. We can provide support. And I think that's what the Mahoning County Mental Health Recovery System does. And I think that's what we're all going to do. So again, I just want to say there's no wrong numbers. So again, this is a call to action. We're taking a pledge. We're not going to have 49 next year. Every year, it's not going to go up. The other person I invited on today is Tony, and she's from the Mercer County Behavioral Health. And the reason I invited them is I've been reaching out to Mary Ann Daniels, who has my job in Mercer County, and they're seeing the same things that we're seeing. They're seeing the increase in deaths. They're seeing the increase in men. And we share the same media market. So when we do something, the same people are watching it. And if we don't speak with the same voice, we're not going to have positive results. The other thing we've seen is there's been a few people that have taken their lives from Mercer County that have ended up in our EDs. And again, we need to work as a team. So I think Tony is on this call. So with technology, Brenda, can you bring her in here?
There, she just needs to unmute.
Here she is.
Actually, thank you, Dwayne. Actually, it's Tracy, but I answer to anything.
Okay. See, I'm sorry. I got nervous. I didn't eat candy. So turning it over to you and let you introduce yourself and go from there.
Thank you so much. Tracy Bornick, Behavioral Health Administrator for the Mercer County Behavioral Health Commission. We really do appreciate the invite in collaboration with Mahoning County today, and we'll gladly speak a little bit about what trends we're seeing in Mercer County here and some of the initiatives that we have going on with our Mercer County Suicide Prevention Network. We actually have had, until this year, our suicide deaths have been trending downward. At the highest of 2019, we had 20 deaths. Those trended downward up until this year. Last year, we had 9 deaths. So we really worked hard to work at initiatives to hopefully made an impact on some of those numbers. Unfortunately, this year, just as last Friday, our numbers completely doubled. We have 18 deaths by suicide as of this past Friday. So we're really, trying to look at what's happening and what we can do to make an impact. As Sandy mentioned earlier, most of the larger portion of those numbers for us were deaths by gunshot wounds. And we have 39% of our individuals this past year have been over 60. So the larger portion of ours right now are below that number, but certainly we're seeing that those numbers and certainly looking at everything that we can potentially do to impact those numbers going down. We have a wonderful collaboration with our county coroner, John Libinati. He attends monthly to our suicide prevention network meetings, provides us this data, and works directly with some of the initiatives that we've developed through this suicide network prevention meeting group. Sitting beside me is Anna Shears, who is the facilitator of this network. We meet monthly, and we have been for a number of years now. We have a great collaboration, just as you have on your discussion board today. We have stakeholders throughout the county coming together to, make an impact. Some of the initiatives I'd like to share with you are specifically for the older folks too. We have many education programs, including QPR, Question, Persuade, Refer, Talk Saves Lives, Mental Health First Aid, and Youth Mental Health First Aid. QPR, and I believe, Anna, correct me if I'm wrong, Talk Saves Lives we have went out and marketed to and had discussions with every senior center in Mercer County over the past 2 years. Training as many people as we possibly can. And just as I think Dwayne said, if you see something, say something, and, connect individuals to an organization here in Mercer County. Our agency happens to run the 24-hour mental health crisis line. So we have folks on ready and answering the phone directly to take people's calls if they're struggling with depression, with suicidality. Our folks are not only telephone crisis workers, they will go mobile to anywhere in the county that individual is having a crisis and meet them, talk with them, and help them through whatever that is, connecting to resources, or if needing, connecting them to, hospitalization, if that's the answer for that person. Our other initiatives is a Posters and Coasters initiative where the message is there is hope. And we have our 24-hour crisis line number on those. If you drive through Mercer County, hopefully you'll see we have some of those there is hope signs as yard signs. The Posters and Coasters have gone or in the process of going through every single bar in Mercer County. And our coroner is helping us deliver those. The posters are also going to physicians' offices. As someone mentioned earlier, at least 8 of our suicides this year had a recent trip to a medical doctor. So yes, medical professionals are having contact, whether they know it or not, with individuals who are contemplating suicide. We also have the posters and coasters signed, "There is hope." We have had thousands of cards made up and are in all the food banks. And the food banks was willing to distribute throughout the county. So anyone that was picking up food have a card, and it has some information on the back of the card, what they can do if they're feeling depressed, or they're feeling down, they're feeling suicidal. We felt that that was a really good way to reach out to a lot of individuals that might not be in contact with us, reaching out for help directly, but would have something tangible to put on their refrigerator or hold on to, pass along to a family member or a friend if they had somebody that was struggling. So we've really tried to do a lot this past couple years in making an impact in our county. We have about 110,000 people in Mercer County and 18 suicides this year. We really want 0. We're really working with a 0 suicide initiative in moving forward. So thank you so much. If there's any questions, we'll be glad to answer them for you. And hopefully you have a little bit of information about what is happening here in Mercer County. One last thing that we're planning in instituting in 2024, we have not had a suicide loss support group in Mercer County for many, many years. There are grief groups certainly in Mercer County, but we had 4 individuals trained in how to set up a loss support group. So our intention is to have 2 groups running in different parts of the county, hopefully by June, if not earlier this year. So we're very excited about that for individuals who have lost a friend, a loved one to suicide, that they can have a group specifically meeting with peers who have gone through the same loss. So thank you so much, Dwayne, for inviting us, and certainly any questions, be glad to answer.
Thank you. We're hoping to partner with you, in the future coming on, starting in January. Some things I forgot to mention, and I'm glad you brought that up. But in Mahoning County, we have a staff member trained at our board to provide mental health first aid. And for people that don't know, mental health first aid is similar to Red Cross first aid that just gives you enough medical information to keep somebody alive until a professional can come. Health first aid is pretty similar. It gives you some of the topics, understand some of the terminology, understand some of the safety risk factors, until you can get.
You want to see it? Yeah. There's yours.
We have QRP trained facilitators that will start. We have two of the things we started that just was amazing is we started a loss and DOS team. The loss team is for people that are survivors of suicide. And one of the reasons that we did that is we did not want people alone in one of their darkest hours. So we work close to the coroner's office. If the coroner goes to the scene and there's family around and there's support, then we'll reach out at a later date. But if someone is alone, then we'll have usually a survivor of suicide, a family member can call on that person. But even if we don't go in that moment, we send out cards, we continue to provide support. I think what was amazing with Mahoning County, the TV stations did a little blurb on it when we first started it, and we got like 16 applications immediately. And I thought, we'll never get anybody to do this for free. And it was overwhelming, the support. So we have that going on. Again, we're going to all work as a team to make sure there's no wrong numbers that people call. In Ohio, we're blessed. Governor DeWine sees mental health as a priority. And so we're working with that. We also are blessed to have 3 county commissioners that are very supportive. Anthony Trafficani is here. And so whenever we need something, we say it and it happens and it gets done. So we're gonna get this done. We're gonna work on it. Lee, did I miss anything or?
We got it all.
Huh?
Yeah, I think you covered everything.
Okay. So anyway, if anyone has any questions for Tony, any of the speakers, they're available. Yep. Anybody have any questions? Well, I want to thank everybody for coming. As I said, it's strange to have this during the holidays, but it's the perfect time. When you invite your uncle or your grandfather or your dad to an event, or please invite them. Don't be afraid to ask, because the myth, and she talked about it a little bit, but the myth that if you bring up suicide, you're going to put it in their minds, that's totally false. If you're concerned, ask somebody, are you thinking about hurting yourself? Have you hurt yourself? It's very hard for a person to say, I'm thinking about taking my life, but it's a little easier for them to get that word out, yes. So you're thinking about hurting yourself, if you want to talk about it, we need to be through this. So next year, hopefully we won't have 49 families and Mercer County won't have 18. So again, thank you for coming and Merry Christmas.